Hello, I'm Donna Lowry, host and Capitol correspondent for Lawmakers on Georgia Public Broadcasting. Welcome to the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series. We welcome our viewers on Georgia Public Broadcasting and the AJC.com through a partnership with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Now, this is the runoff among candidates for the mayor of Atlanta. Let's meet the candidates. They are, in alphabetical order, Andre Dickens serves on the Atlanta City Council representing Post 3 at large. Felicia Moore is the Atlanta City Council president. Now let's meet our panelists. J.D. Capelouto is a reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And Dave Huddleston is an anchor and reporter with WSB-TV. For complete rules on today's debate, please visit the Atlanta Press Club website, atlantapressclub.org. To start the debate, each candidate will be asked 2 questions by the panelists. Candidates have 60 seconds to answer each question. And Dave Huddleston, you get the first question to Felicia Moore.
Thank you, Donna. Madam President, the first question. A city resident said, and you posted on social media, that there have been no decent Atlanta mayors since 1974. That included Andrew Young and Maynard Jackson among them. Why did you post it to your Instagram account in the first place, since you say you don't agree with him?
Well, he did not specifically say that. He said that he had moved to Atlanta in 1979 and there were no decent mayors since he had moved to Atlanta. I did denounce his comments. I returned his money, and I was not aware of his social media post that he had personally made.
Did you post it on your account at all?
I did post the posts because we were doing canvassing, and we did post that he was endorsing my candidacy, but understanding the time frame in which he was referring to, the nuance was not readily recognized. And as soon as we did, and it was found out that he had some very serious posts himself, we did denounce it and return his money.
All right. J.D. Capelouto, you have a question to Andre Dickens.
Yes, thank you, Donna. Councilman Dickens, you've said that you want to create a new city Department of Labor, a new chief education officer position, a new office focused on anti-displacement. My question is, how do you plan to fund these new initiatives? And what would you say to voters who might worry that they would only add to the already complex bureaucracy at City Hall?
Yeah, absolutely. That is exactly right. I want to create an Atlanta Department of Labor because people deserve to be able to earn a living in this city and get a great job. And that's what I want to be as the jobs mayor. So this Atlanta Department of Labor is going to have just a couple of employees that also work with WorkSource Atlanta, which is heavily funded by the federal government already. And as it relates to an anti-displacement office, it's just quite important that we focus on making sure that our senior citizens and legacy residents can actually live in this city that they've sown seeds into for all this time. This office doesn't have to be complicated or excessive in expense because it can come right up under our housing office that already exists. So what I'm talking about is not an explosion or a great expense at adding a lot of labor and expenses to the city government. It's really adding more people that help supply supportive actions that we really need.
Okay, thank you very much. J.D., your question to Felicia Moore.
Yes, Council President Moore. In the past, when you were a council member, you voted no on a number of measures that otherwise had broad support. There were a number of Beltline-related ordinances and the 7 of the budgets proposed by Mayor Reed's administration. Now, some people have criticized you over all those no votes, that propensity to vote no. What's your response to that criticism?
Well, my response to that criticism is I was doing my job as a check and balance to the executive branch. The no vote on the Beltline was not the only vote that I took on the Beltline. I'm very supportive of the project. It was related to the funding mechanism, the tax allocation district, where we would have taken, and we did take, the capacity from being able to help our most blighted community areas that needed that assistance. And then the other votes on the budget, because I am such a budget hawk and I really understand the nature of our budget, there were different reasons for those different 7 years that I voted no. In a check and balance to the executive branch, someone needed to stand up and say that we were not doing it correctly. I even wrote a budget one year in an attempt to have a budget that I felt I could support, and that I knew the citizens' money was being spent wisely.
All right, thank you very much. Dave, you have a question for Andre Dickens.
Thank you. Councilman Dickens, affordable housing has been an issue you've championed since you've been on council. Yet it continues to be a major problem. Why is that? And what do you have planned that will turn things around?
Yes, since 2010, the cost of housing has increased by 50% in the city of Atlanta, but working class folks have only had their salaries increase by 10%. So a lot of people begin to be cost burdened across our city. And so that's why I want to build or preserve 20,000 units of affordable housing in 8 years. We're going to do this by aggressively building on the 800 acres of vacant land that we have by Atlanta Housing Authority. That's the Buckhead Courts, Bowen Homes, et cetera, to build multi-family, mixed-income housing. But we're also going to make sure that people are able to get a home, to be able to afford a mortgage by having down payment assistance through Invest Atlanta and through NACA. These things have plagued our city because we haven't had a leader that's been completely focused on it. Atlanta Magazine has called me the affordable housing champ, and I have worked with all of the major leaders in affordable housing across this city, and I will make sure that we get this done. We don't have to do a lot of new things. The new thing is doing the old thing well.
All right, thank you very much. Now that concludes the first round of the debate. The candidates will now ask their opponent 2 questions each. Candidates will have 30 seconds to ask the questions, 60 seconds to respond, and the candidate who asks the question will have 30 seconds for a rebuttal. By random selection, Andre Dickens, you may ask the first question.
Yeah, Council President Moore, this was addressed a little bit earlier, but I want to kind of double down on it. Atlanta is moving forward, and we need to make sure that we have a mayor that's progressive and able to see how to move things forward. And what has happened is, however, you have constantly voted no. You voted no to the Beltline. You voted no to body cameras by police. You voted no to 7 police budgets. You constantly voted no to so many countless things. How can the citizens of Atlanta trust that you'll be an effective leader to move the city forward when you constantly don't find a way to say yes, but you always say no?
I don't always say no, and I say no when it's appropriate, and that's why the citizens of this city have said yes to me time and time again in my reelection. I spoke to the Beltline, I spoke to the budget. As it relates to the body cams, you should have also voted no. That was the most shady deal that I'd ever seen come through City Hall in my 20 plus years as an elected official. When you do a procurement in 2 weeks, when it typically takes 6 months, when the department picks a vendor who had a better product, and then we turn around and spin on a dime and do what the mayor's office wants and change it, you should vote no on that. If we had the product that we were looking for, when Rayshard Brooks happened, we wouldn't have been looking at concrete and pavement. We would have had officers that could have responded because they knew an officer was down. That camera wouldn't have fallen off. I voted no, and I'm glad I voted no, and I hope that as mayor, we can get that procurement relet and get the best product for our citizens and the department.
Andre Dickens, your rebuttal.
You know, real leadership looks like rolling up your sleeves and finding a way to find compromise and to say yes. I'm an engineer, so I'm a problem solver. When I saw a problem, I created the Atlanta Department of Transportation. When I saw another problem, I created the Beltline inclusionary zoning. When I saw another problem, I helped to get employees to $15 an hour minimum wage. It is imperative that the mayor of the city of Atlanta find a way to progress and move the city forward. And I think that you have to take accountability for all those times you said no to progress.
All right, thank you very much. Felicia Moore, it is your turn to ask a question of your opponent.
Sure, Mr. Dickens. You know, I want to talk about courage and decisiveness. So you ran for the seat for the late, great John Lewis for his unexpired term. You were not successful in that. Then you announced that you were running again for re-election for your post 3 at-large seat. And then when the seat opened for mayor, once our current mayor said she wasn't running, you decided you were going to run for mayor. So is this indecisiveness, or are you just an opportunist?
No, this is not indecision or opportunist movement. What this is me making sure that I'm going to lead the city of Atlanta into the future. And that's what I'm doing right now. I decided to run for mayor because I looked at the pool of candidates that were running and I said that this city needs a leader that has the head, the heart, and the hands to get things done. And so the opportunity came up when Mayor Bottoms decided that she was not going to run. And I fully knew that you were in the race and others. And I said that I want to make sure that this city is run by sure hands and an effective executive that can lead us into the future. I have the skill set and a full set of skills and experiences that have prepared me to be mayor. So I'm ready to be mayor right now, and that's why I'm here on this stage with you.
Ms. Moore?
Well, I'm a strong and experienced leader, and I'm able to make decisions, even if those decisions are no when everyone else is saying yes, when it's the right thing to do. And so I stepped into this race at a time when no one else had the courage to do it, to move the city forward, to help us in a time that we certainly have critical issues before us. And I want to be our next mayor because I can make those tough decisions. I have the experience, I have the know-how, and I have the will to make our city better.
All right. Thank you. Andre Dickens, you may ask your question.
Yeah, Council President, the voters were looking forward to this runoff to be between us because they thought they would get a clean campaign and that we could just really address the issues. But they're being disappointed by some of the things that they see that are coming out around your camp. You said that you were going to release your taxes, but you failed to do so. You had a racist individual stand next to you and denounce every black mayor in the city of Atlanta. And third, I've seen a attack ad by your secret super PAC that has darkened my skin.
Your question.
So how can you stand there and have these things occur in your watch and you not speak to it and stop these individuals from smear campaigns?
Well, first of all, as mayor, you should do your, as a candidate that's offering yourself as mayor, do your homework. And I said that I would release my tax returns, and they are released. So do your homework, and you will find them. And what you will find is that I have made a personal sacrifice to make sure that I spend full time in service to the citizens of the city. I answered the question about the supporter, which I denounced. I denounced the post that he made that I was not aware of, and we did return the money to the campaign. And so I am acting as I should as an elected official, as well as a candidate for mayor, making sure that I am transparent and doing what I say that I'm going to do.
Well, Council President, some of these shady antics that people around you are doing are part of the ugly past. And I would ask that on behalf of the citizens of Atlanta that are disappointed by some of these attacks that are clearly divisive and a part of a racist past, that you would denounce them right now and ask them to call off their divisive antics that are happening on your behalf in your campaign.
Thank you.
Is it possible to respond? Because
yes.
you did ask me to do
30 seconds.
something. And my response would be, you will need to show me what it is that you're talking about, because I'm not aware of it. And if it has anything to do with anyone who's supportive of me, I will certainly denounce it, but I'm not aware of what you're referring to.
All right. Ms. Moore, your final question of this round.
So much has been said in many of our campaign debates and forums about the defund the police vote that you made, and you've made many explanations as to the vote and what it was and what it represented. But I want to ask this question related to the judgment. And what about the process, and not about the process or the intent, but the judgment. So I want you to explain why you thought a vote was a positive vote to make when you were warned that it would have devastating impacts on police morale. And
Ms. Moore, your question.
Okay.
Well, quite frankly, Ms. Moore, the only person that has voted to defund the police on this stage is you. when you voted 7 times against the police budget while you were a city council person. I've never voted to defund the police. We haven't even taken a vote as such as city council. What I did do in 2019 was I voted to give police officers the largest raise in the history of Atlanta. And in 2020, we actually did take time out, 7 council members, to look at police training and to talk about police operations. Our standard operating procedures was what we wanted to look at, because police officers have told us that they no longer wanted to respond to mental health cases as well as homelessness. They felt like we needed a non-emergency squad for that. And so that was what we were intending to do. We were unsuccessful at that, and now we're moving forward. And that's why I have my Safe Streets plan, which is a balanced approach to safety and justice, and it's ready to make this city safe on day one.
Ms. Moore, your rebuttal.
Yes, $73 million set aside from the police budget. It decreased morale. It made many of our officers leave, which has left us in this crisis that we're in now with the uptick in violent crime. I have always supported our police and our firefighters and voted for amendments to those budgets, fought very hard, as a matter of fact, to make sure that they got the raises they deserved.
All right, thank you very much. That concludes our second round. For those just joining us, this is the runoff debate between candidates for the mayor of Atlanta. We will now go back to the panel to ask questions to the candidate of their choice until we run out of time. As a point of moderator privilege, I may also ask questions of the candidates. I will determine when a rebuttal is also appropriate. JD, you get the first question in this round.
Great. This will go to Councilman Dickens. This is about economic incentives. So let's say a developer wants to do business with the city, but only on the condition that they get millions of dollars in tax breaks from the city in order to build here. What would be your thought process going into those kinds of negotiations? And do you think the city needs to do more to make sure tax abatements are fair and administered wisely?
Yeah, absolutely. Tax abatements are a prized tool to be able to incentivize development. But what I want to focus on is development in underdeveloped areas. It is time for the southwest and southeast part of our city to start having development, but development without displacement. We need good grocery stores. There's too many food deserts in that part of town. And so I want to incentivize healthy food options in those areas, as well as opportunities for job centers and banks, and as well as pharmacies and medical facilities. So yes, I will be able to use economic incentives for those projects, but I will not be lured into doing economic incentives for deals that would pencil out already for some large developer or some large corporation. If they can make it happen on Peachtree Street, et cetera, we should be focused on using those tax incentives for development in area where an opportunity won't arise unless we help a developer bring it to bear. I'll use my Georgia State-based economic development masters and put that to work, as I will do at Invest Atlanta when I'm mayor and chairman of that Invest Atlanta.
Thank you. Dave, your question.
Question for Madam President. Madam President, there's been a lot of talk, of course, about Buckhead becoming its own city. What is your plan to unify Atlanta and stop the threat of Buckhead becoming its own city?
Well, I believe that I'm uniquely qualified to unify this city because I've represented a district that actually goes from Bankhead to Buckhead and also has a large Latino population, so I'm used to working with different people. And I also have had support in that area. And so people are looking for us to stop any succession movement on day one, and that is even before I get sworn in. That is right after I'm elected. I'm going to be reaching out to those who are against the movement and work with them to strategize on how to stop it. But I'll also be meeting with those who want to leave the city. I'll be at the state legislature. I will also be there in the event they do get a referendum to do the things that I should be doing as mayor to address our crime, to address our service delivery that people are paying for, and to also make sure that we're doing it in an ethical manner, showing and demonstrating that I am a leader that can move our city forward.
Thank you. JD?
Council President Moore, earlier tonight I asked Councilman Dickens about how he would fund some proposed new city departments. I want to ask you a similar question. Just yesterday, you said that you want to create a 24/7 unit of unarmed first responders that would be dispatched through 911. How will you fund that initiative?
So many of the initiatives I believe can be funded by reallocating money in our budget. So the first thing that I'm going to be doing is asking particularly the current mayor to work with me in auditing all of our departments citywide so that we know performance-wise and financially how they're stacking up. If there are opportunities where we can shift money, and there's plenty of money in city government, it's a matter of priorities. This will be a priority for my administration. We will also look to, if we are taking the burden off of our police officer, is there capacity in the budget that we already have under consultant services that they are using right now? If not, the council will be working with me to make sure that we make it a priority and increase the budget in one area and decrease it in another. That's how budgeting is done.
Dave, another question.
Councilman Dickens, what is the one thing professionally since you've been at City Hall you wish you could do over?
That's a good question. What would I do professionally at City Hall that I wish I could do over? I'd have to think about that. There's a lot of progress that has been made, a lot of things that we've worked on. I think, some of the things I would do is immediately, as soon as I got into office, I, found out about individuals that were working for city government that they were making $10 an hour. And I started working to help them get to $15 an hour. And I did that by making it 13, 14, then 15 in 3 successive years without a tax increase. But I would actually like to look at that now and see how we can do more to get them beyond $15 an hour and make sure that they can live in a wage that can actually afford. The average 2-bedroom apartment in Atlanta is $19 an hour. So I would start looking out even more for the employees of the city because we did a good thing by going to $15, but I want to make sure that we raise the wages of our hardworking employees just like we did by giving police officers that large raise as well.
Thank you. JD?
I'm actually curious to ask Ms. Moore the same question. What's something at City Hall that you would do over?
The one thing that I will do over, or wish that I could do over, is had the legislation that I did after the vote that we took to do eminent domain to the properties in Peoplestown. The council was offered that without explanation or notation that people actually lived in those properties. And I, in response to that, passed legislation that requires that we know the status of the property, whether it's occupied, unoccupied, whether it's commercial, residential, et cetera, before the council takes action. So if anything I would have done, if I wish I would have had that legislation passed so that we would have known before we went down this terrible hole that we're in. We need to make those families whole, and we need to resolve this issue on behalf of the people in Peoplestown, but also on behalf of this city.
All right, thank you very much. I have a question, and I want to focus a little bit on the relationship between the Atlanta mayor's office and the governor's office, and this is for both of you. And we know that there's been a strain from everything from the airport takeover to things dealing with the pandemic, mask mandates, whether businesses should open. What would you do to shore up this marred relationship between the state and the largest city that happens to be in the capital? These are important to Georgia. And I'll start with you, Mr. Dickens.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We have to have a great relationship with the state. It is fundamental for the mayor to work with the governor and all of the state legislatures that we can. And I will make sure that I'm doing it right now. I'm not waiting to when I become mayor. I'm meeting right now. I've already met with a lot of the state representatives and state senators on both sides of the aisle, not just Democrats, but also Republicans. I've talked to Governor Brian Kemp already, and I've also prepared myself to meet with the Speaker of the House, Speaker Ralston, tomorrow. So I'm working right now with the state officials in the capacity as a city council member, just like I did as the transportation chairman when we were going through a tough time dealing with the airport takeover. We had to work very hard with the state, and I will continue to work with the state to make sure they don't want to take over our airport and they won't be successful in that, but also working with the state to make sure that they understand the very valuable resource of having Buckhead stay with the city. I don't want it to get out of the hands of the state legislature. I want them to be able to manage that and not allow Buckhead to leave. So I'm working right now.
Thank you. Ms. Moore, same question.
Well, I don't have to start these conversations. These are things that I've been doing for the decades that I've been serving as council member and now as president of council. You know, when we were under threat of the airport takeover, I was the one that was at every hearing. I was testifying before the body. I was meeting with the author of the legislation and meeting with leadership. I've had several meetings with the governor. I've met with the lieutenant governor, was honored by the lieutenant governor, worked in cooperation with him, and he even appointed me to the Georgia Freight and Logistics Commission. But it doesn't stop there. I've been active, engaged, involved, and held leadership positions in the Georgia Municipal Association, so I know elected officials across the state. I'm on the Atlanta Regional Commission, and so I know the leadership across our region. And I'm also on the National League of Cities and have held leadership positions and worked with them across the country to make sure that we have policies on the federal level. So this is not something I'm new to. I've been doing this for all the time that I've been elected.
Thank you very much. Dave.
Question for both candidates, starting with Madam President. You've known Councilman Dickens for several years, working at City Hall. What would you say are areas he needs to improve on professionally? And Councilman, vice versa.
Well, I would say to move into the role of being the mayor of the city of Atlanta, it takes more than just passing a couple of pieces of legislation and touting that, as well as just doing the job of a council member. And that's why I believe that I'm uniquely qualified to run for this position, because of the things I just mentioned. I have taken and make myself a student of city government, knowing it in and out, working on the state level, working on the regional level, working on the national level, learning best practices to bring to this city, getting a master's of science in administration, and I did it purposely to focus on public administration so that I can know how to make this city better. And so I have been a student of it, I have exercised it, and I've provided even counsel to Mr. Dickens and other council members as it relates to the rules and operations of city government. And so I believe that those are things that he can strengthen himself in.
Thank you. Mr. Dickens?
I can repeat the question for you, Mr.
Sure,
Dickens, if
please.
you want. You've known Council President Moore for several years now, working with her at City Hall. What would you say are areas she needs to improve on?
Yeah, I think Council President Moore has to own up to the responsibility that she's had over 24 years in government. Being able to just point out errors and say this was bad, or vote no, or say you don't like this or you don't like that is not true leadership. It's about taking ownership and delivering results for the people of Atlanta, particularly all of the people that are in your district. When you were District 9 representative, you have to be able to get things done. And over 24 years, I would imagine that you would have to have a body of work that everybody in the city would know a lot about. And so I would say, because she doesn't have that body of work, that means there are some deficiencies in how she goes about delivering results. There's a lot of tisk-tisking, saying things are bad, looking at the glass as half empty, but a mayor, a leader, a chief executive knows how to get to yes and make things happen. And so I think she lacks what she can improve upon is the ability to implement and actually lead. She's mentioned she's a student. Now it's time to be the principal.
Thank you. Ms. Moore, you have 30 seconds for a rebuttal.
Well, currently, my body certainly of work is long and storied and evidenced in District 9 in all areas of my district, and particularly as it relates to policy. I am the one who have authored the first Inspector General of the city. I'm the one who has authored the legislation to create an independent procurement review officer. I'm the one that authored legislation that has gone statewide for Maddie's Call to find our wandering seniors, and the list goes on and on.
Thank you.
I have a body of work.
Thank you. JD.
Yes, Council President Moore.
Yes.
Back in 2017, after the shooting of a recording artist outside a music studio in your district, you proposed an ordinance that would require new recording studios in the city to get a special use permit to operate and a number of other restrictions. Now, the council overwhelmingly rejected this ordinance, and you were the only person to vote in favor of it. So my question is, do you still support that idea, and is it something you would pursue as mayor?
No, it's not something I would pursue as mayor, and my co-sponsor was Councilmember Dickens. We were responding to the issues that were going on in District 9 at the time, knowing that there was nothing to be done or could be done about the studios that were there, but trying to find a way that helped the studios in one instance to make sure that they weren't getting constant complaints from neighbors and disturbing their business, but also to help the residents in the city to make sure that they were at least 300 feet away from their home. I voted for it because I told the community that I would do the best I can to make sure in the future that we did not have these conflicts. I thought that that was a good way to handle it. Unfortunately, politics got in the way. The narrative changed to something that was not true and is still continuing today in this race. But I wanted to make sure that both recording studios can operate and flourish, as well as communities can have their quality of life as well.
Thank you. 30 seconds to you, Mr. Dickens.
Yes, Council President mentioned my name, and I co-sponsored it with you. I signed on to it. I lived in that neighborhood, but when I got into the details of it, I didn't agree with it, which is why I voted no. And this is an example of how I went over and talked to the studio and lots of studios, and we got an understanding of how they will make sure that they keep the noise down. And it's actually, a lot of the noise comes from individuals driving and having loud music going to the studios and leaving the studios, and them hanging out in the parking lot too much, and then the violence that ensued. They changed that practice, and now we're going on 5 or 6 years without any incident because we worked together and found a way to get to compromise, and you don't have issues anymore.
Thank you very much. Dave?
Councilman Dickens, we often hear about the first thing someone will do once they become mayor. What is the second item you want to fix if you become mayor?
Yeah, it's a lot of things to work on, and I'm glad that you asked about the first 2 items that I would like to work on. One is, of course, to make sure that we open City Hall, reopen it on day 1. City Hall is closed right now, and I want to do an audit on all constituent-facing departments. That's Department of Public Works, that's the Department of Transportation, that's all of our departments that the customers depend on, because service delivery is very important. The second thing is I will make sure that we put the police chief on a 100-day contract to bring down violent crime. We'll have metrics, but bring down violent crime, to begin the recruitment process towards 250 new officers, to retain officers that are currently on the force, and metrics related to our community-based policing. If I get a third item, I would make sure that we start the process of having a chief education officer that works with the Atlanta public school system so that we bridge this gap and be able to prepare our kids for the future. I have several of them, Dave, if you want me to keep going, but I'm going to do a lot in the first 100 days.
Thank you. Dave?
Madam President, the same question. What's the second item you would fix?
Well, the second item, of course, the first is the one that's on everybody's mind, and that's making sure every neighborhood is safer across this city. But the second item will be the thing that I would ask for before I even get sworn in, and that is looking at our departments. Each and every one of our departments are dysfunctional. You know, we're not getting our yard trimmings picked up. People are cussing as you're driving down the street because you keep hitting those potholes. That service delivery has gone away. And so what I want to do is make sure that we are looking at who is managing these departments, getting the correct management in place, looking at our financial position to make sure that we can deal with the capital costs that we're going to need to be able to support getting the services that we deserve, but more importantly, communicating with the citizens about the state of our city as I find it, so that we can work together and know together how we're resolving these issues.
Thank you. JD?
Yes. Councilman Dickens, Atlanta's tree canopy is an important part of the city and its identity. But environmental advocates have waited for years for the city to complete an update of its tree protection ordinance. It's still not done yet. You supported the introduction of a new tree protection ordinance. Why hasn't it passed yet, and what direction do you think this new tree ordinance should take?
Yeah, JD, you're right. This is the city in the forest, and we must protect our tree canopy. It helps us to be able to keep our areas cool and shaded, and also provides a beautiful life for everyone to be able to enjoy. And it also keeps us from having erosion from all of these heavy weather events. So I am in full support of having a new tree ordinance that allows us to preserve our tree canopy while allowing us to still have development. It's moving slow. These tree ordinances takes time, and I think that one of the first few things that I'm going to do when I'm mayor is to make sure that our city planning department picks this back up and gets on the pathway to passing a legislation that we all can agree to, and that also helps us move the city forward. I'm a big fan of affordable housing development, and I want to make sure that as we develop out our tree canopy, that we make sure that as we develop affordable housing, that we are also respectful of our tree canopy. It's hard work. This is important work that we must do, because we do want to maintain our tree canopy, and this city is beautiful because of it.
Thank you.
And that's why we have to move forward quickly.
Thank you. Ms. Moore, I'd be curious your answer to the same question.
Well, my answer to the question is, if we care about it so much, why is it still on hold? And one thing I've known from experience and being an experienced policymaker is when you put your name on a piece of legislation and you want it to pass, you work for it. You push for it. You advocate for it. When they want to hold it, you ask them not to hold it. You continue to push until you get what you want. So if it's a care about the tree canopy, this council should have passed it. Frankly, we're in an election year. People are up for office, and things like that kind of lay on the desk because people don't want to make the tough decisions. And there are tough decisions to make, balancing development in our city and our tree canopy at the same time. So if we really care about the trees, pass the ordinance, and let's save our trees, and let's help ourselves in this climate emergency that we find ourselves across the country and across the world.
Mr. Dickens, you may have a rebuttal if you'd like. 30 seconds.
No, I don't have to rebuttal that because I'm moving it forward once I become mayor.
All right. Thank you very much. Dave.
A question for both of the candidates, please. A Harvard University study said Atlanta has one of the largest wealth disparities in the country. Why do you think that's the case? And what specifically would you do to change that? Starting with Madam President.
So the case is because it's been going on forever. And there hasn't been any focused attention to that. And that is one thing that's going to be in my top priority as mayor of the city, because it deals with everything. It deals with safety, and it deals with the greatness of our city. Education is a very key component to that. And I want to work with our school system to integrate what they do and what we do at the city. That means making sure that we can help grow our city workforce for the future, but also using our recreation centers, not just for recreation, but as points of exposure for our youth, where we can excite them about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, where we can excite them about trades. If they're not getting the trade training at school, we can provide those kind of opportunities at our centers. I know that if kids get excited about doing something, whether it's being a recording artist or whatever, and we keep them involved with that, they will stay out of trouble.
Thank you. Mr. Dickens.
Yeah, here's the difference. When I see that there's an income inequality in our city, I don't just talk about it and push it out to the future. I roll up my sleeves and I got something done. This is why when I created the Technology Career Program at TechBridge, this is a pathway from poverty to prosperity. I worked with CEOs and CIOs and CTO, Chief Technology Officers, for major corporations, and I asked them, how can we make sure that we get all of this untapped talent in our city that is in poverty? How can we get them training to make sure that they can get these great middle income, high-tech jobs? And I created a technology program that trains people to get $60,000, $70,000 jobs in just 4 months by getting certifications. When I'm mayor, this is why I'm going to create the Atlanta Department of Labor, because we have plenty of industries that need a workforce. They're depending on us, and we don't have to import talent to fill all these roles. We have homegrown talent here that we can raise people up to get those great jobs. I tell every CEO, I don't care how many buildings you have in Atlanta, I want to know how many Atlantans are in your building.
All right, JD, a question from you.
Councilman Dickens, a top issue for many voters, as you surely know, is city services. It's been brought up a few times tonight: delayed recycling pickup, permitting, 311 response times. You and Council President Moore have both said tonight you want to do an audit of city departments to find out what's not working, but audits can take a while. What other immediate steps would you take as mayor to improve city services?
Yeah, right now we have to basically first open up City Hall. This is important so the constituents can come in and get the basic services that they need. We have to reopen. But the reason for the audit is to make sure that our service delivery, to be able to see how far it is from our service level agreement. If we say we're going to fill potholes in 5 days, are they taking 6 days or 7 days? Not just leaving it up to our anecdotal responses to it's not happening fast enough. I am going to be data driven. I'm a chemical engineer. I care a lot about the metrics. And so what's important is why we do the audit is so we know how far we are from the goal. But to start right away, it's about going down there and making sure that as a chief executive that you look all of the employees in the eye and say you're working on behalf of a public that needs you right now. So we will make sure that we fill vacant positions, but also make sure that our departments are operating at full capacity in terms of operational excellence. And of course, all the while, I'll be adding technology to the mix so that we can do our job more efficiently.
Thank you. Ms. Moore, same question.
Well, first of all, I don't need an audit to tell me what's wrong. I get that told what's wrong a lot because I'm very accessible and I talk to the employees who do the work and they tell me what's wrong. And so I know that it's dysfunctional. I know that we have bad management. I know equipment is down. I know facilities are bad. And so that means I know that we're not going to get the outcomes that we have. The purpose of the audit would be to give us more detail about performance and financial, about how we can fix what's already we know is broken. So the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that I look at the management and make sure that we get the right people in place to right size the ship so that we can start to get moving on getting city services back on track.
All right, thank you. Dave Huddleston?
A question for both of the candidates again, starting with you, Madam President. What type of real support will the next mayor provide to MPUs? Specifically, how will the next mayor get more residents to know about the MPU system and get involved?
So I started out as a neighborhood president and then chaired a neighborhood planning unit and served as a delegate from an MPU on the Atlanta Planning Advisory Board. And I believe in the MPU system and it needs a boost. And number one, people need to know about it. And so that means we have to invest in making sure that we send a signal, send out social media as well as mail and others to let people know what the system is, number one, and number two, how they can get involved. I believe the more citizens that get involved in our neighborhood planning unit system, the more input that we can have as a city to hear them because they are the official arm of our city. They're the official feedback that we receive. And I believe now that we have entered into the world of COVID, we can get more people engaged by trying to have hybrid meetings where you can come in person, but you can also be involved through technology. That's how we get more people involved. And I'm looking forward to working with our MPUs to help their capacity building.
Thank you. Andre Dickens?
Yeah, I am a supporter of the MPU system because they were created by the late, great Mayor Maynard Jackson when he saw fit to make sure that communities were able to give feedback and input and make decisions on behalf of the citizens of Atlanta in their specific area. I, too, was also a neighborhood president, vice president, and a representative to our MPU. I currently, as a city council member, attend a number of MPU meetings, whether in person before COVID, but now online. What I think we have an issue with is the communication. That we ought to make the MPU meeting invites on social media, make them very much inviting to individuals, but also I believe that we can get more standardized meeting agendas because what happens is individuals don't want to attend an MPU unless it's just a hot button issue where they're going to go vote no or vote yes. And I think that what we have to do is make sure that the MPUs have an agenda that's inviting for people to attend and also that they get the reward of seeing the project go from implementation to fruition at the end.
Thank you. JD.
Councilman Dickens, this one's for you. 3 months into Mayor Bottom's term, she told all the members of her cabinet to hand in their resignations, and then she decided who she wanted to keep from the previous administration and who to let go. She later said that one regret she had was that she didn't do that even sooner in her term. So my question is, would you take a similar step with the current administration officials? And if so, when would that be? Day 1, day 100?
Yes, absolutely. I can recognize that Mayor Bottoms did make that statement about having done that process too late, which is why my process will start on day one. I have individuals in my head that I would ask for all of them to put in their resignation, and there will only be a few that I know of that I will retain. It is indeed, I've been there for 8 years, and I know how this city has run, and I understand that we're going to need new leadership in some of the departments as well as the cabinet. What I'll be looking for is from the private and the public sector, individuals that are very capable, filled with passion, but also extremely ethical in how they do their business. So I'm going to go out there in my transition team and start aggressively seeking the talent that we need so that I will already be prepared to have their resignations sent in from the current individuals that I know we won't be moving forward with. But there are some extremely talented people that are there right now. And because I spend so much time working with them, I know who to keep and I know who not to keep.
Thank you. Ms. Moore, the same question.
So I will be starting the day after I'm elected, starting to look at who is in place and who will be replaced. And there will be replacements. It won't be a wholesale replacement. I believe we will do it over time. I would also want to get the benefit of what they have done, what they are working on, and get that knowledge so that we can pass it on to the next team member. But I will be selecting my own team, whether it be immediately or over time, to make sure that we get the things that we want to get done, and that's making this city safe, and it's making sure that we can deliver the city services that our citizens deserve. And again, I say it's a management issue, and so we need some highly capable people to do these things. And I'll be reaching out not only here in the city, but also looking nationally for people who have been able to change culture in an organization and to turn us around and do turnaround in their departments. Those are the kind of people that I want to have on my team.
Thank you. Dave Huddleston?
Question for Madam President. Crime, of course, has been a driving force during this mayoral race. But how do you plan to make the city safer without making certain citizens feel like they are being harassed by the police department?
So that means that we have to work on the culture of our city government. So first, I'm going to start with the leadership, an interim chief, and then look for a permanent leader, whether it be that interim chief or someone that we bring in nationally that shares my vision of keeping our citizens safe, but also making sure that citizens feel safe in their interactions with police. I've had family members who have been beaten by police. I've had close friends who've had those incidents with police. I have personally run into officers as an elected official and as a regular citizen and not like the interaction that I have with them. And so I want to make sure that I set the tone at the top as the mayor, that we're going to do policing in this city, but we're going to do it in a way that respects the community. And we're also going to let our officers do what they ask us to do. If you see something, say something. And I'm going to ask them and get an anonymous line where they can give tips about their own officers because they know who the bad ones are in their own department so that we can have also an independent body to root that out.
Thank you very much. Andre Dickens, I'd be curious your answer to that question.
Could you repeat the question?
I sure can. Of course, crime has been a driving force, an issue during this mayoral race. But how do you plan to make the city safer without making certain citizens feel like they are being harassed by the police department?
Yeah, Dave, I'm a native of Atlanta, so I'm very much aware of our civil rights history, our human rights history, and also our progress towards criminal justice reform. This is why I've offered up my Safe Streets Atlanta plan, which is a balanced approach to safety and justice. It's about being smart on crime and not just tough on crime. This is about making sure that we move this city forward with making sure that we hire officers that we train in a 21st century way to be able to de-escalate crime and understand racial sensitivity and conflict resolution. It's about making sure that our officers have a great relationship with the community, which is what I did in 2017 when I was public safety chairman, and I had what I called walk-in talks in every zone, where we had police officers and community members and clergy going out into the community and talking and walking and pointing out issues that would address crime. We want our officers to fight violent crime, but we also want to make sure that we keep them from being able to have any excessive use of force and swing the pendulum back the other way to where we have excessive use of force across our nation.
Thank you. Thank you. JD, another question from you.
Yes, this one's going to go to both of you. We'll start with Council President Moore. The city is currently in the process of getting public input on a list of infrastructure projects that would be funded by a multi-million-dollar infrastructure bond. Given this, and with yesterday's signing of the federal infrastructure bill, what would be number one on your list of most needed infrastructure projects in Atlanta?
So number one on my list will be for us to go back to many promises that were made and promises that were not kept, from Renew Atlanta Bond all the way back to the Quality of Life Bond, which was the first time that we did bond issue. There are some very significant projects that have had a lot of community support and a lot of community input that frankly have not taken off because of mismanagement of money and overpromising things that we could not fund. So I want to start there because I believe the citizens deserve those projects to be built. And then next, we will be doing a total assessment, neighborhood standards, where we're going through every neighborhood in this city and assessing the needs of our residents to make sure that we're putting funding where it deserves. And we're also going to be funding transit, looking to see how we can utilize some of that money to position the Beltline rail that we want, or the Camelton Road rail line, and even the Clifton Corridor. There are some significant transit projects that are outstanding, and that doesn't include below ground.
Thank you. Andre Dickens?
Yeah, what an exciting time to have this opportunity where the infrastructure bill that was passed by President Biden and signed by President Biden on Monday is now going to find its way to Georgia and to Atlanta, where we want to be able to use that for significant projects to add to the quality of life of everyone. I'm looking at rail on the Beltline and out to Camelton Road, where individuals that are at Greenbrier trying to get into the city downtown to work spend 40 minutes on a bus to get to a rail station. Above ground, we have to do rail, and we also have to make sure that we complete streets by having sidewalks and bike lanes so that we can repave our roads and get rid of all of these potholes, et cetera. So what we also have to do is go below ground. The city of Atlanta has a sewer grid that continues to need adjustment and improvement because we have a city of a lot of hills, so there's a lot of valleys that end up having flash floods and lead to troublesome issues. And so we're going to work above ground and below ground. Also, since the pandemic, we all should know that parks are a vital part of our infrastructure. So I will be making sure that we invest in parks, our roads, transit, as well as sewers.
Thank you very much. Dave, you have the final question.
A question for Councilman Dickens. Is the Atlanta you grew up in providing the same opportunities to children today? If not, what are you going to do to turn that around? And if it is providing the same opportunities, how do you plan to improve it?
Yeah, this Atlanta is slightly different than the one that I was blessed to grow up in and go to the Atlanta public schools and graduate to go on to college. And I went to Georgia Tech and then Georgia State right here in the city of Atlanta. That's becoming to be more and more difficult to see people have that pathway. Atlanta right now has the highest income in mobility. A child born in poverty has a 4% chance of making it to the upper middle class. This is because we have a lot of growth, but we have an imbalance in our growth in the city. I will make sure that we balance out this growth by geographically and demographically. We will grow the southwest and southeast part of our city to make sure we have development without displacement, but we will also make sure that demographically our black and brown individuals will have the opportunity to get great jobs, to be a part of our social economic inclusion, to be a part of that ecosystem by training that I already provide at Tech Bridge, but also with our unions and apprenticeships, making sure that we have a chief education officer to work with our school system and after school programs. We'll do it together.
Thank you very much. Ms. Moore, I know you didn't grow up in Atlanta, but do you have a response about what changes you've seen over the years?
Yes, certainly. I come here to Atlanta like others looking for the great promise and opportunity, and I found it. And I saw when I first got here, there were youth programs, particularly when I was first at City Hall. We would have youth every summer that would come there, that would work, that would be able to be supervised and learn different things and intern in our offices. I've seen that go away. And I've also seen where our recreation centers were thriving locations where kids could go and learn, have recreation or meet with their friends and do different things. Of course, COVID has a part of it, but what has also happened is over the recession and other times, we have reduced our funding and reduced reduced our attention to our services, to our youth, particularly Camp Best Friends, and we need to revitalize that and increase it because we certainly need to be paying attention to our youth. Kids aged 12 to 24 are the ones who are committing a lot of crimes, and we need to pay attention to them.
Well, thank you. That is all the time we have for questions. Each candidate will now have 60 seconds for a closing statement. And Andre Dickens, you get the first closing statement.
Well, this has been a fantastic evening, everyone, where I've gotten a chance to be able to answer questions as it relates to how are we going to operate this city. I believe that this election is about the future and the soul of the city of Atlanta, this wonderful place that I was blessed to be born and raised in, to be educated in, and to have the opportunity to raise a family in, to start a business. And now I want to be the mayor that has the head, the heart, and the hands of a leader that can get things done. It's no longer time to have a bunch of conversations about things that don't get done. We need a chief executive right now, someone that knows how to drive home and implement things to make sure that the citizens of Atlanta see the results immediately. A part of our city is looking to leave because they want to feel safe and they want to feel heard and get the value. Well, that's the same for all of Atlanta. North side, south side, east side, west side want to feel safe and want to feel heard. I'm Andre Dickens. I'm smart enough to listen, but I'm strong enough to lead, and I want to be the next mayor of the city of Atlanta.
Thank you. Felicia Moore, please give your closing statement.
Thank you to the Atlanta Press Club for this opportunity to come and speak to the voters. You know, I have come to Atlanta, the land of opportunity and promise. I have offered myself in service and taken it one step at a time, from neighborhood to NPU to working at City Hall to running for council and now as president and offering myself to serve as your next mayor. We need someone who has experience and the day one ready know-how to get things done in City Hall, one who has demonstrated through policy and through work and action, not only inside City Hall, but with those relationships that we need to build outside of City Hall to get the things done that we need. And I have exhibited that in all of my years. I stepped up every time that I understood that I had to take on a little bit more responsibility in order to serve the city that I love so very much. And so I'm stepping up to this role to be our next mayor, and I would love your support.
Thank you. Well, that concludes our debate. We'd like to remind voters that the runoff election is Tuesday, November 30th. Please check with your polling location on dates and hours for early voting. Our thanks to the candidates and to our panel of journalists. We'd also like to thank the Atlanta Press Club and Georgia Public Broadcasting for organizing today's debate. And we thank the Atlanta Journal-Constitution for serving as a sponsor. For more information about the debates the Atlanta Press Club will host this election season, visit the atlantapressclub.org. I'm Donna Lowry. Thanks for joining us for the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series.